So before we get into this week's assessment of student loans, I wanted to give more of a realistic example of basically everything that we talked about on last week. So, we talked about loan services, interest rate, payoffs of student loans, for forbearance. Well, we're getting to forbearance this week, consolidation of student loans. So I wanted to show you a more realistic example of student loans. So I'm going to use my account for example. So basically what we're looking at right now, the principal balance on my current student loans is $39,925.59. That's the principal balance on the loan. Currently, unpaid interest on the loan is $6,197.92. So the total balance for the current loan is $46,123.51. So as you can see, I had an unsubsidized loan, which we talked about on last week, which they called at that time an unsub Stafford loan. Then I had a direct sub Stafford loan, another direct sub Stafford loan, and then I had an unsub Stafford loan, federal Stafford loan, and then a federal unsub Stafford loan. So we talked about all of those loans. So that's what I was talking about on last week when I said you could have multiple loans. So as you saw on this example, I have multiple loans. But then if you look at loan number 10 and 11, when we talked about on last week, we talked about consolidation. What I ended up doing, I consolidated my loans, and what they did, they put all the subsidized loans together, and then they put all the unsub together. So when they did the sub, it totaled $15,854.04, and then the direct unsub totaled $24,071.55. So if we look at the view details on or the breakdown of that, that's what we was talking about on last week when I talked about if you consolidate your loans, they'll consolidate all the loans that are alike. They won't mix two separate types of loans together. So then if we look, I have a fixed interest rate on the loan, and the original principal balance was 15,854. Unpaid interest is 1,631. So that leaves the principal balance of 15,854. The monthly payment is 4550. The repayment plan is income based, and the repayment term is 151 months. So the expected payoff is 7/11/2033, and the next due date. This is actually from February, so it was showing that the next due date was March 11th. Now, if we looked at the interest rate, we can see that the interest rate is at 0%. And if you all heard in the news back when we first got into COVID-19, that the federal government put a halt on student loans. So basically, no payment was required, and everyone interest rate went to a 0% interest rate. So that's why that interest rate is at zero. And so that was the subsidized, and then this is the unsubsidized loan. Like I said again, on last week we talked about you can't merge different loans together. So we can see the original balance of this loan was 24,755, unpaid interest 4,056. So then that leaves us back at that 24, and the monthly payment on that is 6909. The repayment plan again is income based. The repayment terms is 165 months. So the projected payoff date is a 7/11/2033, but that will change because I am currently on public service, which we will get into at the very end. But again, the interest rate is 0% fixed rate. So that's how I wanted to give you a more realistic example. I'm going to see if I can show you all one more thing while I'm in here. So my current payment is 117.73 on both of those loans. And again, when you go into repayment, this depending on who your loan service is, this is how your account will look. Whatever my interest rate would have been, that would have been there instead of 0%. And then since I'm on public service, they're listing my public service information right there. So I just wanted to share that with you all. It gives you more of a realistic example of what student loans actually look like. So I wanted to do that to get us into what we'll be doing this week, which is talking about postponing your repayment. So you're going to postpone your repayment or defer or forbearance. So that's what we're going to get into this week. So to qualify to defer your loans or forbearance, you have to have a reason to do that. So to qualify to do a deferment of your loans, you have to be unemployed, economic hardship, a graduate fellowship, a rehabilitation training program, military, or in school. Those are ways you can defer your loans. A forbearance is a medical, if you're in medical school, dental internship, or residency, student loan debt burden, AmeriCorps, teacher loan forgiveness, DoD student loan repayment program, the National Guard, or any other medical or acceptable reason. So these are the qualifying factors for you to either defer your loans or forbearance. Now, when you defer your loans, you can only defer your loans for a 6 month period. Sometimes they will give you a year, but usually you can only defer them for 6 months. Usually, when they ask you to defer your loans, you can only defer them for 6 months. So always remember that. But the thing about deferring your loans, if you defer your loans for 6 months, that interest that was accruing is still going to be accruing. So that means if you go 6 months without paying, any interest that was accruing on loan is still going to accrue, which means when you come out of that 6 month process, your payment is actually going to be high because you have new unpaid interest on the loan. So that's one thing to watch out for if you defer your loans. So to defer or put a forbearance on your loans, you can postpone making payments. That means you are not responsible to make payments at that particular time. It is an eligibility criteria, and some forbearance actually have an eligibility criteria, and others are at the lender's discretion. Most of them have time limits, so that's why I said it's that 6 months to a year. It all depends on your loan servicer. And then unpaid interest, like I just said, capitalized at the end of the loan. So that means when we look back at that daily interest, all that interest is going to be added on to whatever your unpaid interest was. And it lets you know that interest does not accrue on subsidized loans if you're deferring your loans. And then time does not count against repayment period. So basically, what they're saying when they say time does not count. So if you have a loan and once you graduate, and that let's just say that loan is scheduled to be paid off, I'm just going to use October 31st, 2020. Let's say you defer your loans for 6 months. When you come out of that 6 months deferment, you will still have to pay off your loan. You still have a targeted payoff date of October 31st, 2020. So the time does not change. Which that's what they're saying. Time does not count against your repayment period. So that's another factor to keep in mind. Now, I want to go back. I always encourage students to avoid deferring your loans because actually it's going to create more interest. But if you see no other way around it, then you go that way. But always remember, you can defer. That's going to be the first option that they give you. Oh, we can defer your loans for 6 months. And it sounds good because the first thing you think, well, I don't have to pay this for 6 months. But as soon as 6 months go by, then you're going to be back where you started. And you can only defer your loans for so long. So now we're going to get into delinquency, defaults, and collection. So basically, you do not get charged late fees. So let's say your student loan was due, we're going to say today's date, September 21st. If you do not pay your loan on September 21st, they're not going to charge you a late fee. But they will starting the process to actually have you delinquent default on your loan before they return you over into collection. So that's what we're going to talk about with this. And I'm going to tell you about key dates and times you need to remember in this slide. So delinquency begins on the day after your due date when full payment is not made. You need to know that. So you become delinquent on your loan. So if your loan was due today, which is September 21st, if you do not make a payment on September 21st, when September 22nd comes, you are officially delinquent on your student loan. So it always begins the day after. So when September 22nd comes in tomorrow, if I did not make a payment or you did not make a payment, you are officially 1 day delinquent in your student loan. Loan services will then begin activities to try to prevent you from defaulting on your loan, including contacting references and sending notices and contacting you that you need to make payment. Loan services also will try to keep the borrower making payments because it will save the borrower time and interest payments in the long run. Services will also, like I just said, tell you to defer or add a forbearance to your account if needed. But you need to remember that default occurs 270 days after delinquency. So that means 270 days after that, the first day you miss your payment, you have officially defaulted on your student loan. When you default on your student loans, you are no longer eligible to receive federal financial aid. And then you are turned over to collections. This is the part that you do not want to reach. It's okay to, if you are delinquent, maybe a month, 2 months, but you do not want to reach that 270 days because once you do that, you default on your loans, which then hurts you and it hurts your institution. So you never want to default on your student loans. So these are the consequences of default. You are reported to a credit bureau, which will then affect your credit score, and it will be reported, and that is going to damper on your credit score. Like I said, you are no longer eligible for federal financial aid. The loan is immediately due and paid in full. So that means if you owe $60,000 in federal student loans and you hit that 270 days, on that 271st day, they could make the payment. They could make the loan payable in full on that day. Like I said, you lose option for any of the repayment plans. So any of those repayment plans we talked about on last week, those are gone. You do not qualify for those anymore. Collection agencies will contact you, the garnishment of wages and tax refunds. So that means if they wanted to, before you get your check, they could take out money before you get your check. Or if you get income tax back, they can garnish your tax refund so you wouldn't even see anything from your tax refunds because they would take the money to pay it. So let's just say that you default on your loan. So let's just say that you default after 270 days. You either have to repay the loan in full, which most students will not be able to do. You will have to consolidate and agree to repay under an income-driven plan, or you consolidate after making 3 consecutive payments. Then you can all of that. Then will rehabilitate the loan. You can rehabilitate the loan by making 9 on-time payments in 10 consecutive months. And all of that will rehabilitate the loan and basically put the loan back at its current state before you were delinquent on the loan. But you do not want to default on your loan. So I don't like to touch on this too much because this is a place that you do not want to get. So now we're talking discharging, forgiveness, and cancellation. So basically that means you're forgiven, your loan is wiped clean, and you don't have to worry about paying. So to qualify for discharge, forgiveness, and cancellation, either through teaching, public service, disability, or death. Those are the only ways, and death being the only way to get out of your student loans. Now, I'm probably, after our midterms, I will focus more on private loans. Private loans, however, they cannot be discharged or forgiven even with death because you have a cosigner. So then what would happen with a private loan? In the instance of a death, your estate will then be hit with the outstanding balance. So anything that you had, anything left over, so that means life insurance policy, any assets will be required to be rendered to pay off the loan. But with federal, you have no cosigner, so it can be wiped clean. Public service loan forgiveness. That is what I'm currently on. Public service is for any person that is working in what they consider a public service job. So to qualify for public service, you have to make 120 qualifying payments on any direct loans under any of the qualifying repayment plans that they deem qualifying, and you work full time at a qualifying employer. Borrower must also be employed by a qualifying organization at the time that the borrower applies for and receives public service loan forgiveness, or you can shorten it to PSLF. According to the IRS, the forgiven amount is not treated as taxable income. Now, what they are working on currently now, they're trying to count that as a taxable income. So let's say, for instance, you save, let's just say about 20,000 because you're on public service forgiveness. What the federal government is trying to work to do, that 20,000 that you didn't have to pay, they want to count that as income, which means you pay taxes on it. So that's what they're trying to work on, but it hasn't been passed yet. Public service is a big help because basically what it does, let's just say you're on you're on an income based payment plan. They have extended your payments to, let's just say, 20 years. Instead of having 10 years to pay it off, they gave you an additional 10 years, so you have 20 years to pay off the loan. But you qualify and you're working under public service. That 20 years would then be cut down. Once you make 10 years worth of payments, the other 10 years would be forgiven. So that's how that works. So to qualify in payments, you must make 120 separate monthly payments. The loan had to be after 2007. Payments do not need to be consecutive, which means, let's say this month is September, you had a student loan payment due, you didn't, and you have one in October. Let's say you didn't make the payment in September, but you made 2 payments in October, that still counts. Must be for the full amount due under the repayment plan, and must be made within 15 days of the due date. So that means, let's say your payment was $100 and you only paid 50. That will not count. But if you did $50 payment this week and $50 payment the following week, you made a satisfying payment and it was for the full amount. It wasn't for partial or anything. Now, qualifying repayment plans, if we remember what we talked about on last week, the 10-year standard qualifies all of your incomes and anything 10-year stamp. So 10-year standard, income-based repayment, income contingent, and pay-as-you-earn. All of those qualify under public service loan forgiveness. So, what is considered qualifying employment? Any government agent. It does not matter what the borrower jobs duties are, as long as it is a government organization. It can be a 501c3 not for profit organization or any not for profit organization that provides quality service or a public service. So that means, for instance, in the school system, if let's just say it was a janitor, that janitor is working and providing public service. So the janitor and the principal both can qualify for public service loan forgiveness. It doesn't matter the job that you hold as long as you are working for a government organization that qualifies as public service loan forgiveness. Now, this is a helpful website for your midterm as well, because you can pull all of this information from this site for your midterm. Also, it just gives you information for you to get a better understanding of student loan. Student loan is like we read in the article is at a $1.6 trillion debt right now. This is something that is real. This is a debt that you will have for at least 10 years. So it's something that is very serious. It's not to be taken lightly. The course was designed for you to know your options. So when you graduate and you are actually in repayment, you know the steps that you need to take. When I graduated from South Carolina State, we didn't have a class like this. So I didn't know my options. I just went with what the loan provider told me. But it's better to be educated so when you go in a conversation with your loan providers, you can actually make a conscious decision and you can let them know, well, I know exactly what you're talking about. That won't work for me. Can I try it this way? So it gives you option and it gives you knowledge, and having knowledge gives you power. So I would advise seniors, juniors, everyone, be aware of this. For seniors, when you get ready to do your exit counseling for graduation, which will be required, you're gonna go back over all of this information. Basically everything that we just did, you're gonna go back into it because basically you're agreeing that, okay, now that I'm about to graduate, I will be responsible enough to repay my student loans, because failure to do your exit counseling you will not be able to graduate. So that's what your exit counseling is. It is all of this information all over again. It's always best to know about the student aid gov and FAFSAed.gov, because it's the same site that you do your FAFSA. As a reminder, FAFSA applications open October 1st. go ahead and do. The earlier you do it, the more money you can get. Any seniors that I may have, even if you're not sure if you're going to go to grad school after graduation, do your FAFSA just to be on the safe side so you have a FAFSA application done. So if you have any funds that would be available to you, they're there. Now, this is the part where I would ask in class if we had any questions that go over student loan. Um, with us being online, it's a little different. But as we prepare for your midterm, all of the information that we covered in these last 2 weeks will be on your midterm. Your midterm will be solely on student loan information. We probably will have to do another test after midterms, but I want to make sure that you understand everything there is to know about student loans. So once we finish with the federal student loans, then I think this semester I've never done it before, so this will be a first. I'm going to focus on private student loans because mainly we talk about federal, but I want to talk about private as well. But this is what your midterm will consist of. You will not have a homework assignment this week, but you will be, I would advise you to be studying and looking back over these videos before we do our study session and before I upload your study guide to LMS so you know what questions to ask on when we do our study session. That's going to be the purpose of the study session. I'm going to leave it up to you. I'm going to leave the floor open for you to ask. I know what will be on your exam, and I will guide you in the direction you will need to go. But anything that you are not clear on, that's what we will discuss. So again, you have no assignments this week because I want you all to prepare and be ready for your midterm. Like I said, your midterm is coming up very soon. It will be in October. I will keep you abreast of the dates, but your midterm will be due October the 8th. So you have roughly about a week to go. So that's going to be your midterm.